Welcome to True Echo, where real moments and powerful fiction collide to shine light on injustice, resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. Today's story is one that shook a city, sparked a national conversation, and reminded us all that dignity doesn't need legs to stand tall. Based on true events but told with emotional depth and dramatic realism, this is the story of a young black girl in a wheelchair, and what happened when she was pushed too far. The sun hung low over Brookhaven Supercenter, casting a golden hush across the parking lot as families trickled in and out with weekend groceries. It was the kind of Saturday that asked for nothing more than stillness. But for 16-year-old Alana Brooks, the world never felt still anymore. It felt paused, like her life had hit a full stop and the rest of the world forgot to notice. She sat quietly at the edge of the sidewalk ramp, her body upright but unmoving, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The thin fleece blanket across her legs stirred slightly in the breeze, covering what she could no longer feel. 3 months had passed since the accident. 3 months since the drunk driver ran the light. 3 months since she went from basketball team captain and track sprinter to a silent girl in a chair, learning how to breathe around the pieces of a broken dream. Her mother, Sharon Brooks, had wheeled her to this spot just minutes ago. "Wait here for me, baby," she'd said, brushing a braid behind Alana's ear. 2 minutes. I'll be right back with the car. Sharon, always poised, always composed, even in jeans and a hoodie, moved like a woman who knew how to command a room, even when she wasn't wearing her badge. Alana had nodded with a half-smile. "I'm not going anywhere," she'd replied dryly, trying to inject humor into the numbness. Sharon had paused for a second as if seeing through the act, then disappeared behind the automatic doors. Now alone, Alana stared ahead, her reflection faint in the store's glass. She hated the pity. The tilted smiles. The people who walked faster when they saw her, or worse, slowed down with sympathy in their eyes. She preferred the ones who looked away. It made it easier to disappear. A child passed by with a red balloon, its string bouncing against a tiny wrist. A woman with a stroller offered a gentle smile that made Alana's stomach twist. "I'm not broken," she whispered to herself. "I'm just different now." She adjusted her position slightly, feeling the seatbelt press against her waist. Inside the store, her mother was still in line, chatting politely with a cashier. Alana could see her, tall and upright, a pillar in a world that tilted too often. Then the hum of an engine broke the silence. It came fast, too fast for a parking lot. A black SUV roared into the accessibility lane, ignoring the marked lines, the signage, and, most chillingly, the girl sitting just inches from the curb. The tires screeched slightly as the vehicle slammed to a stop, its front bumper jolting her wheelchair with a soft but jarring thud. Alana gasped. The chair shuddered. Her hands gripped the armrests, chest tightening. She stared at the gleaming grille, now a breath away from her footrests. Then the door flew open. A man stepped out. White, maybe mid-50s, red-faced, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. He barked something into his phone, something about a tea time and a client screwing him over, and slammed the door. His keys jingled as he stalked around the SUV, examining it like someone had personally offended him. "Unbelievable," he muttered, his voice dripping with entitlement. "Scratched. On a goddamn Saturday." Alana opened her mouth, unsure if her voice would come. "Excuse me," she said finally, barely above a whisper. I think you might have hit my wheelchair." He turned slowly like a predator annoyed by noise, lowering his sunglasses just enough for her to see his eyes, hard and dismissive. "What did you say?" he asked. You parked too close. This spot is for accessibility. I'm just waiting for my mom." He scoffed. "You're blocking the damn space. Not my fault you're sitting where people are supposed to move." Alana's voice faltered. "She just went to get the car. She said 2 minutes. Yeah, well, maybe she should have parked you somewhere out of the way. This isn't a daycare." The words hit like cold water. Around them, the world slowed. A woman with a toddler hesitated by her car. A teenager pulling earbuds out paused mid-step. A tall man lowered his grocery bags and began cautiously walking over. "Hey sir," he said. "You might want to calm down. That girl didn't do anything." The SUV man spun. "Mind your business," he snapped, his voice cutting like glass. "She scratched my car and now she wants to play the victim." Alana's heart pounded. "I didn't touch your car," she said. "I haven't even moved." "You people always know how to work it, don't you?" he sneered. "Sit around, look helpless, make someone feel sorry for you." She blinked hard. Her face flushed with humiliation. "Please," she whispered. "I just want to be left alone." But he was already moving toward her. Too fast. Too close. And when he grabbed the back of her chair, everything shattered. Alana screamed, not out of volume but of sheer panic. It was the kind of sound that sliced through the silence of bystanders like a razor. Not everyone heard it at first, but those who did felt it in their chest. The man's hand clamped around the handles of her wheelchair and yanked. Art. The wheels jolted backward on the pavement. Alana's body jerked, her arms flailing to stay upright, fingers digging into rubber, searching for control. Her blanket slipped to the ground. "Stop," she cried out. "Don't touch me." But he didn't stop. He leaned over her now, hand rising again. "That's it," he hissed. "Let's get you out of the way." The crowd that had formed, dozens now, froze in a mixture of horror and disbelief. A young mother clutched her toddler tightly. The man with the groceries didn't move fast enough. A teenage boy started recording. A woman gasped and covered her mouth. The scene had turned violent, and no one knew how to intervene. Until one voice broke through. "Take your hands off my daughter." It was calm, controlled, and lethal. The man froze mid-motion, his hand still hovering over the wheelchair's backrest like he had just been caught committing a crime, which in truth he had. He turned slowly. The crowd parted. Sharon Brooks didn't walk. She strode, like thunder disguised in human form. She wore no badge, no gun, no uniform. But she didn't need them. Authority crackled in the air around her like static before a lightning strike. Her face was carved in stone. Her eyes never left the man who now stood caught in the middle of an unforgivable act. "I said," she repeated, quieter now, deadlier, "take your hands off my daughter." Alana sat trembling, hands shaking in her lap, her eyes wide and glassy. "Mom?" Sharon reached them in 3 strides. She didn't yell. She didn't even raise a hand. She simply stepped between the man and her daughter, her body forming a barrier of living steel. The man hesitated, still trying to recover his facade. "What are you, her nurse or something?" he scoffed. Sharon didn't blink. "No. I'm her mother." "Well, maybe you should have taught her not to block." She was in a marked accessibility zone, Sharon snapped, her voice still eerily level. "You parked illegally. You nearly hit her. You verbally assaulted her. And then you touched her, violently, without consent." He rolled his eyes. "Okay, lady. What are you, a lawyer?" Sharon's jaw flexed. "No," she said. "I'm the chief of police." The words landed like a punch. For the first time, the man's confidence faltered. He scanned her clothes, plain jeans, a dark shirt, nothing that screamed cop. But something about the way the air shifted around her, the murmurs from the crowd, the recognition in people's eyes, it was clear she wasn't bluffing. "Come on," he said nervously. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was." "She's in a wheelchair," Sharon interrupted coldly. "And even if she weren't, your actions would still be criminal." Someone whispered, "That's really her. That's Chief Brooks." The man's posture changed. His shoulders slumped ever so slightly. His hand dropped from the wheelchair. He tried to smile but it came out twisted. "Look, I overreacted. Okay. Can we just calm down?" "The only thing you hit harder than her wheelchair was her dignity," Sharon said, voice sharp. "And you're about to find out what happens when a grown man assaults a minor in front of witnesses." As if on cue, red and blue lights flared at the edge of the parking lot. A patrol car pulled in slowly, stopping just feet from where the incident had unfolded. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, scanning the crowd. One of them spotted Sharon immediately and gave a nod of recognition. "Yes, Chief," he said, walking toward her. "He assaulted a minor," Sharon said firmly, eyes still on the man. "I want him detained and booked, for intimidation, physical contact without consent, and verbal harassment." The man flinched. Wait, what? Are you serious? This is going too far." "You put your hands on my daughter," Sharon replied, unwavering. "That's more than enough." The officer took the man's arm. "Sir, turn around, please." "No. This is harassment. She should be apologizing to me," he shouted, struggling. "No," Sharon said. "She should have been left alone." The handcuffs clicked into place. The crowd, silent for so long, now murmured in agreement. Someone clapped softly. A teenager near the back whispered, "Finally." Phones captured every second. Sharon crouched beside her daughter, brushing a braid from her face. "You all right, baby?" Alana nodded through the tears. I wanted you to come back," she whispered. Sharon took her hand. "I always will." And that was when the story stopped being just about what happened in a parking lot. It became something bigger. Because by the time the SUV driver was led to the squad car, the entire world was already watching. By the time the man was loaded into the back of the patrol car, the atmosphere in the parking lot had shifted. It was no longer just a bystander moment. It had become a moment of reckoning. A crossroads between what was silently accepted and what would no longer be tolerated. The patrol vehicle pulled away slowly, its lights dimming as it merged back onto the street. The crowd began to thin, but not before people exchanged looks, silent acknowledgments that something important had just happened. A few offered nods to Sharon. Others glanced down, ashamed they hadn't done more before she arrived. But the phones kept recording even as the engine faded into the distance. Sharon remained crouched beside Alana. "You did everything right," she said quietly. "I froze," Alana whispered. "I didn't know what to do. I couldn't move. He was yelling and I couldn't stop him." "You don't ever have to apologize for freezing," Sharon said. "You stayed. You endured. And you spoke. That takes more strength than most people can even imagine." Tears spilled freely down Alana's cheeks now. "I thought," she paused. "I thought I was invisible. Like he didn't even see me as a person. Like I was just something in the way." Sharon gripped her hand tighter. "He didn't see you. That's true. But everyone else just did. And they won't forget it." And they didn't. Because by the next morning the footage had gone viral. It started on a local Facebook group. Then Reddit. Then TikTok and Twitter. By noon, it had been picked up by 2 regional news outlets. By 4 p.m., a national cable network ran the clip under the banner, "Police Chief Confronts Man Who Attacked Disabled Daughter." The still images said everything the captions couldn't. Sharon standing between her daughter and the aggressor, face steel set. Alana in the wheelchair, trembling but upright. And the man, mid-grab, mid-sneer, caught in the worst version of himself. Outrage surged. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Alana. Hashtag disability is not invisibility. Hashtag mother-in-chief. Civil rights groups weighed in. Disability advocates published op-eds. City council members scrambled to get ahead of the headlines. The mayor released a statement of support for the Brooks family, calling Sharon a pillar of both compassion and accountability. But while the public's eyes were on the footage, Sharon's focus remained solely on her daughter. For Alana, it wasn't just the media storm that made the days that followed overwhelming. It was the flood of memories triggered by the confrontation, the helplessness of the crash, the sudden loss of movement, the sense of being powerless against things too big to control. And now she had to see herself replayed again and again, frozen on screens as the girl who got pushed. But Sharon wouldn't let the world reduce her daughter to a victim. One night, as the two of them sat in the living room, Sharon reviewing reports, Alana scrolling through the messages of support on her phone, Sharon spoke up. "Do you know what I see when I watch that video?" she asked. Alana looked over. "What?" "I see a girl who held her ground. Who didn't cry until she was safe. Who didn't lash out but spoke up anyway." Alana gave a soft, bitter laugh. "Most people just see a girl in a wheelchair getting harassed. Then let's make them see more." A week later, Sharon stood on the stage at City Hall. It was the annual Justice and Equity in Public Spaces Forum, typically a modest event attended by a small crowd of community advocates and city staff. But this year the room was packed. Students sat cross-legged on the floor. Reporters crowded in the back. Cameras lined the sides. And in the front row, center where no one could miss her, sat Alana. Hair braided, posture upright, face calm but focused. She had insisted on wearing her old basketball team hoodie. "It's who I still am," she said. Sharon approached the podium. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The room leaned in anyway. "Last week," she began, "my daughter waited outside a grocery store while I went to get our car. She was parked, legally, in an accessibility zone. She caused no harm. She sat quietly. And still, a man chose to attack her. There was no gasp. No murmurs. Just quiet." Sharon continued. "He attacked her not with fists at first but with words. With assumptions. With hate disguised as irritation. He touched her without consent. He insulted her humanity. And then, when called out, he acted like he was the victim." She let the weight of that hang in the air. "My daughter is not weak," she said. "She is not fragile. But on that day she was made to feel both. Not because of who she is, but because of someone else's ignorance. Because someone decided that their inconvenience mattered more than her dignity." A stir of emotion rippled through the crowd. Sharon stepped closer to the microphone. "Let me be clear. We cannot tolerate spaces, public or private, where people with disabilities are made to feel invisible. We cannot normalize language that dehumanizes. We cannot accept violence, even when it wears a button-up shirt and drives a luxury vehicle. The room erupted in applause. But Sharon wasn't done. She announced a new set of city policies: mandatory anti-bias and disability rights training for all public officials, expanded protected accessibility zones in high-traffic areas, and increased legal penalties for verbal and physical harassment within those zones. She ended her speech with one line that would be quoted again and again: "No one's dignity should ever be parked in someone else's blind spot." Alana's head dipped slightly. Then she looked up and their eyes met. A flicker passed between them. Strength. Resolve. Love. And something else. Fire. The applause in the City Hall auditorium echoed long after Sharon left the podium, but the real resonance came later, in conversations, classrooms, homes, and headlines. Her words had struck a nerve not just because of her badge but because of her clarity. In a world too accustomed to dismissing the quiet, she had forced everyone to listen. Yet for Alana, the echo of that moment wasn't about public policy or city-wide reform. It was something more personal, more difficult to name. Because after the applause faded and the press packed up, she still had to go home. She still had to face the fact that the world now saw her as that girl in the video. She wasn't ungrateful for the support. The cards, the messages from strangers saying she was brave, the emails from other kids in chairs saying they looked up to her. But she didn't feel brave. She felt exposed. Like her trauma had been turned into a banner, held up by people who didn't know the weight it carried. One night, sitting on her bed, Alana scrolled through the comments under a viral clip of the incident. "That man should be in prison. She's a hero. Sharon Brooks is a legend. God bless that family. How could someone treat a disabled teen like that?" And then mixed in, quieter but there, came the poison. "You can't tell me she didn't provoke him. She probably scratched the car and played dumb. She's lucky her mom's a cop." Not every disability is visible, unless it gets you views. Alana locked her phone and threw it across the bed. She didn't cry. Not this time. She just sat there numb again. Then she rolled over to her desk and opened her drawer. From beneath a stack of old-school photos, she pulled out a picture of herself from exactly 1 year ago. Her hair was messy with sweat. Her basketball jersey hung loose on her lean frame. Her smile, wide, proud, defiant, stretched across her face as she held up a trophy nearly half her size. That was the girl people used to recognize in the halls. Now they whispered when she wheeled by. "I haven't changed," she said to the photo, voice thin. "So why does it feel like everything else has?" Down the hall, Sharon stood in the kitchen, staring at her own reflection in the dark window over the sink. She heard the faint thud of the phone landing on Alana's bed. She knew her daughter was wrestling with more than just recovery. Sharon had faced press conferences, courtroom stares, gunfire, and years of political landmines in a male-dominated world. But nothing had prepared her for the helplessness of watching her daughter unravel quietly, not from injury, but from isolation. That night she made a call. 2 days later, Alana found herself wheeling into a gym she hadn't visited since before the accident. The hardwood floor still shone. The air still smelled faintly of sweat and pine cleaner. But everything felt different, distant. She didn't speak as she rolled past the bleachers. A few kids practicing half-court shots stopped to glance her way. She kept her eyes forward. At the far end, a man in a warm-up jacket waved. "Coach Hernandez." "Alana Brooks," he said, voice rich with welcome. "I was starting to wonder when you'd show up." Alana looked down. "My mom didn't tell me where we were going." Coach smiled. "Yeah, she tends to play chess, not checkers." He motioned to a nearby rack. "That chair's for you." Next to it sat a custom-fitted sports wheelchair, low-backed, angled wheels, built for speed and maneuverability. Alana stared at it like it was a foreign object. "I can't play anymore," she said. "I mean, not like before." Coach nodded. "No, but maybe like something new." She hesitated. "People are going to stare." He nodded again. "Probably. So make it worth watching." Alana laughed once, short and dry. But then she wheeled forward. 15 minutes later, sweat beaded her brow. Her shoulders burned. Her arms ached. But for the first time in months, her breath came fast from effort, not panic. She missed most of her first shots. But not all. Coach didn't say much. He simply watched, adjusted her angles, gave a few quiet tips, and stood back as she began to move again, differently but no less fiercely. At the other end of the gym, Sharon watched through a narrow window in the hallway. She didn't come inside. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, still, proud and blinking fast. Meanwhile, across the city, another transformation was happening. But it didn't involve applause or cameras. It involved Roger Hastings, the man who had shoved a teenage girl's wheelchair and ended up in handcuffs. The courtroom was colder than expected on the day of sentencing. Sharon didn't attend. Neither did Alana. The city prosecutor read their impact statements aloud, and the judge listened with growing intensity. Roger stood with hands clasped, his lawyer silent beside him. He had pled guilty to misdemeanor assault. The fine was stiff. The public record, permanent. But the judge wasn't finished. "You will complete 300 hours of community service," she said flatly. "Specifically, at Rosewood Center for Rehabilitation and Youth Services." His head snapped up. That's a facility for kids." "Yes," the judge replied, voice hard. "Children with disabilities. Just like the one you humiliated in public." "But Silence, she said. "Perhaps if you learned to push their wheels instead of pushing them out of the way, you might begin to understand the difference between power and decency." He didn't speak again. The following week, Roger reported to Rosewood for his first shift. There was no press. No reporters. Just a volunteer badge clipped to his chest and a responsibility he hadn't asked for. Escorting patients, children, to and from their therapy sessions. His first task was to help a girl about Alana's age to the therapy wing. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Let's roll." For the first time in months, Roger Hastings had no words. And in that silence, not of applause, not of authority, but of humbling, something finally began to crack. Roger Hastings was not a man used to silence. He was a man of boardrooms, backhanded praise, and loud commands barked into Bluetooth earpieces. But at Rosewood, no one listened to his title. No one cared about his past sales records, his golf handicap, or the luxury badge on his SUV. Here the currency was patience. The power was empathy. And Roger had neither. He tried, awkwardly, to navigate the wheelchair down the hallway, but the girl beside him, Talia, was not having it. "You're steering me like I'm a grocery cart," she said flatly. "You have to watch the wheels. Tilt it, not shove it." "I'm doing my best," Roger muttered. "No," she corrected, "you're doing what you think is enough." That line stopped him cold. It echoed far too closely to something he had once said in court when trying to minimize the incident with Alana. "I didn't mean harm. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know she was disabled." His mouth had said one thing, but his posture, then and now, said another, that he had believed himself too important to be wrong. At Rosewood, that lie unraveled fast. The children didn't care who he had been. They noticed when he flinched at their twisted limbs. They noticed when he winced at their scars. They noticed when his voice softened from pity instead of respect. But most of all, they noticed when he stayed. Through the awkward silences. Through the fumbled straps and clumsy wheel turns. Through the discomfort that didn't belong to them, but to him. By the second week, he no longer brought his phone inside. By the third, he asked how to adjust the push rim angle. And by the fourth, Talia let him steer without instruction. But respect, real respect, didn't come until one rainy afternoon, when a new boy named Malik refused to go into the hydrotherapy pool. He screamed, cursed, kicked. Other volunteers backed away. Nurses tried coaxing. Roger stepped forward. "Leave me alone," Malik shouted. Roger knelt beside him, slowly. "You don't have to go in if you're scared." Malik blinked. "I'm not scared." "I'd be," Roger said quietly. "I hate cold water. And I hate feeling out of control. Makes me feel small." Malik stared at him. "You're big. No one makes you feel small." Roger looked at the boy, and for once, no sarcasm followed. "That's what I used to think too." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Malik slowly rolled toward the pool ramp. From the hallway, one of the nurses whispered, "Well, damn." Later that evening, Roger sat in his car outside Rosewood and stared at his reflection in the windshield. The man who looked back wasn't humbled. Not yet. But he was no longer unshakable. And for a man like Roger Hastings, that was a beginning. Back across town, Alana was discovering her own. She hadn't returned to her old high school yet, opting to continue therapy and catch up on studies remotely. But word had spread about her time at the gym. And after her mother's speech at the forum, people began reaching out, not to gawk but to connect. A counselor from the local university invited her to join a youth panel on accessibility in education. A documentary filmmaker emailed Sharon asking if Alana would consider being part of a short film series on adaptive athletics. But it was the call from East Ridge High that changed everything. "Coach Hernandez says you've been back in the gym," the principal said over speakerphone. "How would you feel about leading a wheelchair basketball clinic for middle school girls in the district?" Alana hesitated. "I don't know," she murmured. "I'm not ready to be the face of anything." "You don't have to be," Sharon said gently. "Just be their mirror." 3 weeks later, Alana rolled into the East Ridge gym again, not to train but to teach. There were 6 girls in chairs waiting for her. 3 of them had never even held a basketball before. One, named Zoe, wore thick braces on her arms and looked down the entire time they talked. Alana didn't start with drills. She started with truth. "I used to run the court like my hair was on fire," she said, a lopsided smile on her face. "Then a drunk driver ended that chapter. I thought I'd lost everything." She paused, scanning the nervous faces. "But I didn't lose the fire. I just had to learn how to aim it differently." The girls listened. And when she rolled toward the hoop, took the shot, and nailed it clean, they clapped not just because she made it but because they saw what was possible. Later that night as they packed up, Zoe whispered, "I didn't think I belonged on a court anymore." Alana touched her shoulder. "You still do. You always did. Some people just take longer to see us." And suddenly, that was the line that hit her harder than any insult ever had. Because maybe that's what all of this was really about. Not just being seen, but refusing to disappear. The next morning, Sharon opened her laptop to find a formal letter waiting in her inbox. It came from the office of the mayor. In bold letters at the top. Nomination for the Civic Resilience Medal, Sharon and Alana Brooks. Sharon stared at it, unsure what to feel. Not because she didn't believe they had earned it, but because recognition had never been the goal. Justice was. And justice had a long way to go. Still, she printed it out and placed it on the fridge under a magnet shaped like a basketball. Alana spotted it later and grinned. "Seriously?" Sharon shrugged. "It matches the decor." They both laughed. But in that laugh there was something else. Relief. Hope. The beginning of something better. East Ridge High's gym echoed again. This time not just with basketballs, but with voices that dared to be louder, bolder, and unapologetically present. The wheelchair basketball clinic had grown from 6 to 15 girls in just 2 weeks. Some came from across the city. Others arrived with siblings, friends, even skeptical parents who stayed and left stunned. The court was no longer just a place for plays and drills. It became a sanctuary. Alana rolled across the hardwood, weaving through cones she'd laid out earlier, calling encouragement to a girl named Jaina who was still figuring out how to pivot. When Jaina finally managed to turn and shoot, missing by just inches, the other girls clapped anyway. "Points don't define us," Alana said, "but effort builds everything." Coach Hernandez watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "You ever think about coaching full-time?" he asked during water break. Alana wiped sweat from her brow. "Not really. I'm still figuring out how to coach myself." "You're already doing it," he said. "Better than most adults I know." That evening, as the gym lights dimmed and the last girl rolled out with her mom, Alana sat in the quiet, letting the echo of the day settle in her chest. 3 months ago she couldn't imagine coming back here. Now she didn't want to leave. Elsewhere in the city, the consequences of Roger Hastings' actions continued unfolding. His community service hours had been extended after he missed a shift, an incident that earned him a sharp warning from the rehab center director. "No shows mean disrespect," she told him bluntly. "If you can't commit, we'll escalate the report to the DA." Roger, who had once been feared in sales meetings and envied at country clubs, now found himself wiping down therapy equipment, helping kids with mobility aids, and sitting silently during trauma workshops that turned mirrors toward everything he had once mocked. But change, when it comes, never announces itself. It starts small. It started the day he walked into the Rosewood Library and saw a framed article on the wall, the one with Alana and Sharon's story headlined, "Dignity in the Face of Disrespect. A City Learns Its Lesson." He stood there a long time, staring at Alana's photo, her eyes forward, her chin slightly raised, her chair barely visible under the podium where she had spoken 2 weeks earlier. A staffer walked past and noticed his expression. "You met her?" the man asked casually. Roger's lips parted, but no sound came out. Finally he said, "Yes." Too late. From that moment on he stopped making excuses. He started showing up early. He started listening. And when a parent at the rehab center asked him one afternoon if he was a therapist, he replied, "No, just someone trying to unlearn." Meanwhile, Alana was finally ready to return to school. The announcement was low-key, just a quiet email to her teachers and a brief message to the student body that she'd be returning with new accommodations. But the reaction was anything but quiet. On her first day back, the main hallway filled with students who didn't just stare, they stood. Some clapped. Others stepped aside respectfully. And a few, bravest of all, walked beside her as if she'd never left. It wasn't pity. It was respect. That afternoon, she found a bouquet of blue hydrangeas in her locker with a note that read, "You made us all braver. Welcome back, Captain." The girls' varsity team. She wiped her eyes, smiling. Her team hadn't forgotten her. And she was ready to lead them again even from the sidelines. Weeks passed. Fall slipped into early winter. And though the headlines began to fade, the impact did not. Sharon's reforms were implemented across the city. New signs, stricter enforcement, and education programs in every public school about disability awareness and bystander intervention. But her proudest moment came quietly. Late one Friday night, after a long day of meetings, she returned home to find Alana in the driveway, practicing shots under the soft glow of the porch lights. Her sports wheelchair moved with fluidity now, grace born not of perfection but persistence. Alana turned as Sharon approached. "Did you see the mayor's press release?" she asked, slightly breathless. Sharon raised an eyebrow. "The one where she named the accessibility reform package after you?" Alana grinned. "I told her not to, but she said I didn't get a vote." "You earned it." Alana nodded, then turned back to the hoop. She dribbled once, twice, then launched a perfect three-pointer that swished clean through the net. Sharon clapped. "That one's going on my highlight reel." They both laughed. Then Sharon stepped closer, her voice softer. "You know, baby, I used to wonder if I could protect you from everything." "You can't," Alana said, finishing the thought. "But you don't have to. Not anymore." They stood in silence for a moment, just the two of them, mother and daughter, beneath the stars. Scarred but stronger. Not invincible but undeniable. That weekend, an unexpected letter arrived at their home. It was from Roger Hastings. Type. Signed. No lawyer's watermark. Read. To Alana Brooks. "I won't ask for forgiveness. I haven't earned it. But I wanted to say that working with the kids at Rosewood has changed something in me. Every day I'm reminded of how blind I was. How loud I was. How wrong I was. You didn't just survive me. You rose above me. And I hope one day you'll know how much that means. Sincerely, Roger Hastings." Alana read the letter twice. Then she folded it, placed it in a drawer, and walked outside to shoot another basket. Not because his apology healed anything, but because she was too busy living to carry his guilt. A soft winter sun spilled across the hardwood of East Ridge High's gymnasium, the light filtering through the upper windows like golden threads. The final bell had rung hours ago, but the building still hummed with quiet energy. Inside the gym, the rhythmic bounce of a basketball echoed off the walls, steady and deliberate. Alana Brooks wheeled herself to the top of the key, gripping the ball with the kind of focus that needed no audience. She glanced toward the three-point line, then back at the basket, her breath calm, her muscles fluid. She pushed forward, one sharp stroke with her arms, then pivoted, dribbled, and launched the ball with a quick flick of her wrists. Swish. No hesitation. No apology. Just purpose. From the bleachers, a few teammates clapped softly. Behind them stood Coach Hernandez, arms crossed, pride barely contained. And near the baseline, as always, stood Sharon Brooks, not in uniform, not in command, just a mother watching her daughter reclaim the fire that life had once tried to smother. When Alana turned to grab the rebound, she caught her mother's eye. Sharon smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it said everything. "You're not just back," Sharon had told her weeks ago. "You're beyond." Later that evening, Alana sat in her room, holding something she hadn't touched since the accident. Her old basketball captain's patch. The threads were worn. The stitching had frayed along the edges. But the words were still there. Lead by example. She stared at it, then pinned it to the wall next to a new edition. Her name now officially listed as a guest speaker for an upcoming Youth Inclusion Summit hosted by the state. Sharon knocked lightly on the door and poked her head in. "Got a minute?" Alana turned. "For you?" "Always." Sharon entered holding a package. "This came today. From the mayor's office." Alana arched an eyebrow. "What now? Another medal?" "Nope. A proposal." She handed her the envelope. Alana opened it to find a single printed page. The city of Brookhaven requests to name the refurbished basketball court at Willow Community Center the Alana Brooks Adaptive Sports Arena. Alana stared at it. You're kidding. I wouldn't dare, Sharon said with a grin. They want to dedicate it this spring. Full ribbon-cutting ceremony. Press. Local news. Alana shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't do all this for recognition. I know, Sharon said, stepping closer. You did it because people needed to see someone who didn't give up. Alana looked down. Even when I wanted to. Sharon knelt beside her chair. Especially then. They sat like that for a moment, silent. And then Alana asked softly, do you think I'm still the same person? Sharon placed a hand on her daughter's knee. No, she said. You're stronger now. You've got roots deeper than most people ever grow. Alana smiled faintly. Even on wheels? Sharon smiled wider. Especially on wheels. The spring dedication ceremony came sooner than expected. The Willow Community Center, once a forgotten building on the edge of town, was now the beating heart of youth sports, thanks to a full renovation funded in part by local businesses inspired by Alana's story. Students, city leaders, reporters, and community members packed the outdoor court as the ribbon fluttered in the breeze. A large banner read, "Strength moves differently." Alana wheeled to the podium, flanked by her teammates and some of the girls from the clinic. She wore a navy jersey with gold trim and the number 5 stitched across the front, her old number. Her speech was short but powerful. I used to think strength was about running faster or jumping higher. Now I know it's about showing up when it hurts. About speaking up when it's easier to stay quiet. About being seen for who you are, not what people expect you to be. The crowd applauded. Everyone here deserves that kind of strength. Not from me, from within themselves. After the speech, Sharon stepped beside her, whispered, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it." Alana looked at her and said, "You taught me how to stand tall, even if I'm sitting down." Meanwhile, Roger Hastings, once reduced to a national headline and public disgrace, had completed his community service and quietly continued volunteering at Rosewood. He didn't ask for a second chance in the public eye. He simply kept showing up, quieter now, more deliberate. When his probation ended, he returned, without obligation. Talia, the girl who'd first corrected his clumsy wheelchair handling, gave him a firm nod one day after he helped a younger boy through physical therapy. "You're not so useless anymore," she teased. He smiled. "Working on it." Months later, Alana sat in a classroom at the university where she had been invited to speak on accessibility in education. She looked out at a sea of young faces, some skeptical, some wide-eyed, some already flipping to a blank page in their notebooks. She began not with her story but with a question. "How many of you have ever felt invisible in a room?" Dozens of hands went up. "Good," she said. "Then you understand. And now you get to make someone else feel seen." That night, Sharon and Alana walked side by side down the city pier as dusk fell. The sky was painted with orange and purple streaks, the water calm and glistening. "You know," Alana said, "I never thought something so awful could lead to something like this." Sharon nodded. "It didn't lead to it. You did." Alana stopped her chair and looked out at the horizon. "Do you think I'll always be remembered for what happened in that parking lot?" Sharon tilted her head. "No. That was just the moment the world noticed you." Alana turned and smiled. "I think I'm finally ready to take the shot." Sharon grinned. "Then step back to the three-point line, baby. And show them who you are." Strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers through resilience, speaks through advocacy, and rolls forward with unstoppable grace. Alana Brooks reminded a city, and a nation, that dignity doesn't come from how we move, but from how we rise after being pushed. And when the world finally saw her for who she was, it didn't see a victim. It saw a leader. No one's dignity should ever be parked in someone else's blind spot. This story moved you, share it. Let others feel what justice looks like. Subscribe to True Echo for more powerful narratives that blend heart, truth, and the echoes that matter most. And remember, every voice counts, especially the ones that have waited longest to be heard.